Ferrante versus Korran. It was a cool spring morning when Ferrante stepped into a town. It was quite large, larger than the ones he'd passed through before. It reminded him of his old home. He pushed the thought from his mind and continued his way, trying to look like he was just another visitor. Ferrante was constantly reminded that he wasn't from here, at least not from the currency era. His situation was complicated. He was once a detainee frozen in suspended animation awaiting trial, which never happened as he awoke to find his kingdom and his people gone. He was still in his own land, but it had changed. It had advanced and left him behind. No trace of his old kingdom was left. He was just a sentry with no purpose and nothing left to protect. But still he bore the marks from his past. He carried a hate hex, something all prisoners in his old home have forced on them, in case they managed to escape confinement. He needed to face judgment to remove it. So now he traveled with his hex, his armor, sword, and lantern shield that carried an enchanted silver flame. Suddenly his eyes caught sight of a magnificent castle in the distance. He paused and admired it. It looked new, with high walls and many balconies and walkways. There was a large banner draped over the gates. He couldn't make out the words, but he did see a line of people waiting to get in. His feet started to move in the direction. Maybe he wanted to see if the ruler could help him, or maybe it was the massive crowd that came surging up behind him. Come on, they're opening the gates. Ferrante held onto his pendant. It was the only thing that kept his hex at bay. It would be disastrous if it fell off here. He was pushed and shoved along. When he managed to wiggle his head out and look up, he was already going past the main gates. He briefly saw a banner with the words, Welcome Duel, before he was swept in. As fast as he was picked up, he was dropped into what looked like a grand hall filled with people talking and moving in every direction. Ferrante suddenly felt very isolated. It was hard not to feel that way when he knew how out of place he was. Verbally asking someone was out of the question. His throat had not healed properly. He was starting to consider penning a message to show someone to ask what was going on when someone with a voluminous red cape suddenly pushed past him at incredible speed. Ah, here it is. A very young voice chirped loudly in the din. Ferrante's head followed the loud person. He could have sworn he felt a brush of cold air as he ran past. He saw a young man, possibly still in his teens, going up to a receptionist's desk. The young fellow wrapped his hand on the wood to get the receptionist's attention. Excuse me, are there any available fighters yet? I've been here forever. The receptionist apologized, stating that most duelists signed in advance, so walk-ins tend to take more time. Ferrante listened and realized this was the opportunity to get information and made his way to the desk. Just as he reached it, the young person whipped around, and Ferrante found himself looking into large eyes shimmering like winter. Wait, were those snowflakes? Hey you! The young man jabbed a finger right in his face, causing Ferrante to back up a step. You haven't signed in yet, have you? He seemed to be waiting for Ferrante's response. Feeling a little cornered, the sentry opened his mouth. I knew it! The young man yelled. His eyes twinkled with icy glee. He turned back to the desk. I have an opponent. Set us up for the fight. Ferrante was left slack-jawed as the lady jotted the information down and a sheet of paper was placed in front of them. The excited person signed his name eagerly, then pushed it to the sentry. Ferrante looked down at the contract. 2 lines for the signatures. Ferrante glanced at the one already filled. Korran. So that was his name. He signed his own on the blank line. No sooner had he finished, Korran snatched the paper and squinted at it. Ferrante? Well, nice to meet you. He didn't wait for Ferrante to even start to form a response before he handed the paper back to the receptionist, who glanced it over and cleared them for a fight that would be held later in the day. Ferrante noticed there were no weapons on Korran, so he correctly guessed he must be some kind of magic user. That was fine. He could adapt. He always did. Later in the day, Ferrante stepped out into the ring. His opponent was already there, waving to the cheering crowd, his cape billowing dramatically in the wind, despite there being none. A magical barrier was set up over the whole area for the safety of the spectators, as some of the fights can get a little intense. So, for the safety of the crowd, the magical shield would prevent debris or the fighters from being thrown into them. Ferrante didn't look at the crowd. He focused on keeping his breathing even as he mentally prepared himself for a friendly fight. The sentry then spotted the owner of this place, a man in what looked to be solid gold armor. He sported a blood-red cape that fluttered gently behind him. He was followed by what seemed to be a female guard holding a golden bow and a young kid wearing a costume that vaguely resembled the Golden Man. Ferrante did not have the opportunity to meet this guy, but he assumed he was a decent person. An announcer declared the start of the battle. Ferrante cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders before entering a fighter's stance of a shield lead. Korran faced Ferrante and spoke arrogantly. Hey, make this fun for me, okay? From under his cloak, he flung a handful of ice shards he made while he spoke. Ferrante dove to one side, and the freezing splinters buried themselves into the ground where he had stood. Ferrante propped himself up as Korran laughed. Wow, you're fast, so that means this fight will last a long time. He flicked one hand out, and more ice formed. So let's give everyone a snow. It seemed like a proper time to drop into his ice puns. More ice shards were thrown at him. Ferrante dodged and sidestepped with ease, even deflecting several off his shield. Korran ran up to him as he flung another round. Ferrante tried to keep a distance, yet Korran was always 5 paces near him and constantly trying to close in. The sentry refused to let him get too close. His military training gave him some advantage as he continued to keep his distance. Suddenly his foot slipped. He gasped as he fell sideways. Luckily, he managed to roll with the fall and hopped up again. His stance was unsteady, however, and he realized the stage was slick with frost. Korran laughed. What? I thought I could ice things up a bit. He laughed at his own pun. Ferrante didn't utter a sound as Korran continued. What? Giving me the cold shoulder? You're making me feel a little isolated. Ferrante stared. He just couldn't wrap his head around most of his puns. Tough crowd. You're really frustrating. And so the fight resumed. Ferrante continued dodging, but his movements were clumsier now. His feet had little traction on the ice-covered ground. Suddenly, the Cryomancer created a long ice sword, though it was more of an oversized icicle. How about we finish this ice and easy? The sentry rolled his eyes and met the other head-on. It was tricky, as the ground was slippery, but Ferrante had to adapt fast. His time as a soldier helped him tremendously to stay alert and his head level even as his balance was compromised. Korran certainly had sword fighting skills, but lacked the proper training to utilize them against someone who spent their early years preparing for night and guard duties. Ferrante saw an opening and lunged forward with his shield out, bashing it against the makeshift weapon, and cracks like 1,000 spider webs appeared on impact before it shattered. Korran laughed humorously. That's stone cold, dude. Ferrante felt a slight chill, which surprised him. He doesn't usually get cold during a fight. He realized what was happening and quickly stepped back. Korran grinned as he pulled some device from his red cloak. In his other hand, he made another ice sword, larger and more detailed. Thanks for the heat. I hope I didn't give you chills. Ferrante quickly checked his flame and saw it had shrunk as the heat was sucked from it and was barely clinging to life. Ferrante was nearly thrown off his feet as a pillar of ice rapidly grew from under his left foot. He staggered back, and another one shot up in front of him, missing him by an inch. Korran moved around them as more ice pillars and walls created a maze-like structure. Ferrante realized he would be trapped on all sides. From the corner of his eye, he saw the glimmer of magic in the frost as a pillar formed. He latched on and rode the thing up, far above Korran and out of the trap. He pulled himself up on top of the pillar, and instantly ducked as a massive ice spike flew over him. Come back! Freeze, don't go! Ferrante jumped backwards onto another ice tower as another wave of spikes flew at him. Ferrante kept jumping and leaping from one mound of ice to another, and Korran gleefully chased him down. He jumped a particularly large gap and struggled to pull himself up. You know, the fight was fun, but this is as far as it froze. His opponent touched the pillar. Ferrante felt his hands become stiff. They were now coated in frost and stuck to the ice. Ferrante ripped them from the pillar, though one was frozen still holding his sword hilt. As he tried to wipe the frost from his hands, the ice structure he crouched on shifted and bent, and he was now sliding down in rapid speed to the ground. Korran waited at the bottom with a large icicle he wielded like a bat. I came, I thaw, I conquered. Ferrante stabbed the sword into the ice, slowing his descent, and swung his shield out, scraping the edge against the ice and sending a cold spray at Korran's face. Cryomancer flinched as after getting an eyeful of frozen chips before Ferrante crashed into him. They tumbled head over heels as both their swords were lost in the disarray, and they slammed it hard into an ice pillar. While Korran shook off his dizziness, Ferrante frantically searched his neck for the cord that held his charm. Dread clotted his stomach at the thought of losing his only defense for his hex. He didn't notice Korran watching him. Ferrante felt great relief when he realized his pendant was still in place. His relief was short-lived as Korran suddenly appeared behind him and seized hold of the leather cord that held Ferrante's pendant. Ferrante grasped at the sword with his half-frozen hands and struggled to hold on to the charm, his mind screaming, "Let go! Let go!" But the only sound from him was a strained wheeze. Korran laughed and pulled harder. "What, is this little trinket your weakness or something?" An ice blade in his hand sliced through the strap, and he yanked it from Ferrante's grasp. The sentry made a strangled yell as his only protection was removed. Korran moved out of reach and inspected the item. "I don't see anything special about." Ferrante didn't need him to finish to understand that the hate hex had taken hold. The teenager's face fell, losing all traces of arrogant glee. It was then replaced by something else, annoyance, resentment, then unfiltered anger, all in that order. He looked at Ferrante like he was looking at his mortal enemy. "You," he growled. Another ice blade formed in his hand. Ferrante reached for his own sword with his still half-frozen hand as Korran lunged at him. Instantly, the shield came into play and repelled the attack. Korran stabbed and swung wildly. The ice blade no longer resembled a simple oversized icicle. It was sharp, jagged, and made with the intent to cause as much harm as possible. The ice tip slammed into the ground, narrowly missing the sentry's knee. Ferrante made an undignified retreat backwards as he struggled to gain his footing. That ended abruptly as his back hit a wall of ice. As the ice spear was thrust at his face for a killing blow, Ferrante deflected it with his shield. The impact staggered Korran, and Ferrante kicked one leg out and caught the other on his ankle. The Cryomancer went down, and the odd device fell from his grasp. Ferrante hopped up and went for a takedown, but Korran was faster. He rolled out of reach while dodging all of Ferrante's attempts to grapple him. The sentry saw a flash of magic in the teen's cold eyes and instinctively jumped backwards. A massive spike shot up from the ground where he had stood. He dashed around the teen as more lethal eyes shot up after him. Korran chased after him as vapor leaked from the corner of his mouth. "It's gonna be a cold day in hell when I..." Ferrante hit the brakes, skidding on the ice into a crouch, shield up, center open. The small flame gave everything it had left, and a burst of silver light swept over the area. It was a spectacular sight, with all the ice reflecting light in every direction, and Korran was right in the center of it. The young Cryomancer screamed as the sight was filled with silver and then white. Enraged, he lashed out at the air in front of him. Puns forgotten, and his desperate search for his hated foe escalated. He threw ice spears in random directions, created spikes and walls in a maddening frenzy. Vapor poured from his eyes, nose, and mouth as his insides were heated like an oven. Still, he continued attacking in his raging hysteria, unaware of the damage he was doing to himself. "Where are you? I'll kill you!" A solid force was brought down at the base of his skull, and Korran dropped into a crumpled heap. Out cold. No pun intended. Ferrante panted slightly, then reached into Korran's cloak and found his pendant. The cord was still cut, but it was safe with him again. He raised his sword in victory over the cheering crowd. Wait, that wasn't cheering. That was screaming. Around the magical barrier, the one set up to protect the audience, was surrounded by said spectators. Ferrante saw the same glassy look in their eyes. They were under the hate hex influence. Dozens and dozens of them swarmed the ring, hitting and clawing at the barrier in a crazed attempt to get the sentry. The wild, angry shrieks echoed around the area as they spewed their hate and rage at him. Many more came running to help, but quickly joined the mob. A few who recognized that something was very wrong wisely stayed back a good distance, watching the scene unfold in bewilderment and concern. Ferrante looked up at the darkening sky as the crowd's hate rang in his ears. Now what?